The dry winds of the Wild West cut across the roofs of Kenwood, sweeping dust into the air until the whole main street seemed to shimmer in a haze. Under the scorching sun, boots scuffed against the ground as townsfolk crowded shoulder to shoulder in the square. Cowboys, cattle hands, gold diggers, and ragged children pressed together in a restless sea. They had not come for mercy. They had come for the raw thrill of watching a life end in daylight. The gallows loomed at the center like a silent giant. The scaffold boards were darkened with sweat and the stains of blood spilled by men who had met their end there before. Above, a new rope swung lazily, its creak in the wind like a wicked laugh echoing out of the grave. The scent of fresh pine from the timber frame mingled with gunpowder and sweat, the true perfume of the frontier, where a man's worth could be lost in a single hand of cards. Upon the platform stood the Apache girl, her wrists bound cruelly behind her back. The rope cut so deep, her skin had split, blood tracing down her sun-darkened hands. Her long black hair, heavy with sweat and grit, curtained half her face. But her eyes, those fierce, burning eyes, shone like embers against a storm. They were not the eyes of surrender, but of freedom, of pride inherited from generations before her. For a moment, the crowd fell into uneasy silence when her gaze swept across them. Then, as if afraid of their own conscience, they looked away, unwilling to be haunted by that fire. The execution drum began its beat. The first strike landed slow and heavy, a hammer blow on every chest. Murmurs rippled through the mass. "She's only getting what she deserves," one man barked. "Savages have no other end," another spat. Their laughter was sharp, but hidden within were sighs, small threads of pity quickly drowned beneath the roar. To most, this was not justice. It was entertainment, a performance to prove that Kenwood's law stood higher than any Apache pride. Among them stood a man in a weather-beaten leather duster, dust crusted on the seams. His shoulders sagged from the miles behind him. The brim of his hat cast deep shadows across his face. His hands clenched at his sides, knuckles pale, trembling as though some great storm brewed within. His skin was carved with the marks of age and desert wind, lips drawn tight enough to bleed. All of it, fatigue, scars, dust, served to mask the truth. Behind his eyes a fire burned hotter than ever, and it was fixed wholly upon the bound girl awaiting death. The town judge, hair white as ash, lifted his gravel-rough voice. "By order of Kenwood, this rebel shall hang as warning to all." A roar erupted. Children perched on shoulders screamed with delight. Women gripped each other's hands, eyes flashing with eager anticipation. Cowboys spat into the dirt, faces lit with the joy of predators circling prey. Yet through the frenzy, the man in the leather coat stood frozen, fists curling until the veins stood on his skin like taut cords of rope. Memory stabbed him. The night she was taken, soldiers dragging her from a tent at the edge of town. Her eyes then, half stricken with fear, half blazing with pride, had pierced straight through him. He had told himself to turn away, to let fate consume her, as it had consumed so many of her people. But her gaze clung to him like a thorn in his soul. Every beat of his heart since, every step that brought him to this square, had been driven by that moment, by her. The drum quickened, death urging itself forward with every strike. The crowd leaned closer, hungry for the sight of rope tightening on flesh. Their breath gathered, a hot wind pressing against the man's chest. His hand brushed the grip of the revolver at his hip, the steel, cold, unforgiving. The veins on the back of his hand swelled red, as though ready to burst. The sun bore down upon the scaffold, turning the rope into a blade of light. The hangman stepped forward, expressionless, hand resting on the lever. The square fell into silence. Only the drum thundered on. Only the wind hissed through the scaffold's cracks. Only his heart hammered as if it would break apart in his chest. He drew a long, ragged breath, his shoulders trembling. And in that moment, all became clear. He stood at the knife edge between the cold hand of law and the burning call of his heart. Delay meant death. Delay meant she would be gone forever. The final drumbeat struck, deep and merciless. The crowd held its breath. The rope swayed, eager to close around the Apache girl's throat. But in the man's shadowed eyes, something flared, no longer doubt, no longer torment. It was decision. And it was a decision that would tear through Kenwood like gunfire and carve his name into its history with blood and powder. The execution drum had barely fallen silent when a wave of noise rippled through the square. Yet in the middle of the restless crowd, the man in the weathered duster stood still, his eyes locked on the Apache girl trembling on the scaffold. Around her, the scene blurred. In his mind, memory surged forward, dragging him back to the beginning, back to the moment that had changed everything. He had once been nothing more than a drifter, earning his keep with his gun and the bounties on wanted posters. The frontier towns all knew his face: whiskey-soaked saloons, card tables stained with blood, and endless roads of dust where it mattered little which way the horse carried him. Then, passing through Apache lands, he had seen her. Just one girl, eyes sharp as blades, movements fluid as running water, and for the first time in years, he had stopped. They had not spoken much. A few words, a glance exchanged by firelight. Yet in those eyes he glimpsed something he had never known: peace, fragile but real. A belief that the world could be different, that white man and Apache need not always meet in hate. He rode away at dawn, but the flame was already burning inside him. When word reached him that she had been taken, his chest had clenched like a fist. They said she had broken the treaty, that she raided the soldiers' storehouse for corn and dried meat stolen from her people. Her trial was swift, her sentence swifter. To Kenwood she was a rebel, nothing more. To him she was proof, living proof, that the flame he felt was not madness. He hid for nights on end, thinking he might simply ride away, abandon the town before the storm broke. But every night the phantom of the execution drum echoed in his head, pulling him back. He knew if he turned away this time, his heart would rot like an untended field. And so, standing in the square now, the choice became clear. There was no escape left, only defiance. The crowd cheered on. The judge waved for the hangman to prepare the lever. The man stepped forward, his eyes flashing beneath the shadow of his hat. Those nearest sensed danger and instinctively pulled back. His hand settled on the butt of his revolver. The scrape of metal against leather cracked through the air like thunder. The crowd stiffened. Guns swung toward him. "What the hell are you doing, stranger?" One soldier barked, voice raspy from tobacco. The man gave no reply. His eyes remained fixed on the scaffold, on the rope swaying above her head. His chest hammered with a violence greater than any gunfight he had ever stood in. There would be no turning back. Whispers erupted. "He's gone mad. He's gonna free the Apache girl. Shoot him now." Before anyone could act, his gun was out. The draw was fast, clean as lightning. The revolver flared in the sun, its barrel not aimed at the soldiers, not at the judge, but at the rope. The shot cracked like a storm. Fibers snapped, scattering in the sunlight. The Apache girl collapsed to the platform, gasping, alive. Chaos exploded through the square. Dozens of rifles lifted in unison, aimed at the lone man with the smoking gun. Yet, he did not falter. Step by steady step, he advanced toward the scaffold, voice carrying above the roar. "Any man tries to stop me, then fire." The crowd froze. Soldiers hesitated. No one had ever witnessed such madness, such open defiance of Kenwood's law, in broad daylight. The judge's face blazed red with fury and terror. "Kill them both!" the old man shrieked. Gunfire erupted. Bullets screamed, splintering timber, tearing earth into clouds of dust. The man surged forward, mounting the scaffold in a single bound, his revolver roaring flame. Each shot struck true. 2 soldiers fell hard, their bodies limp before they hit the ground. Smoke choked the square. Screams cut through the air. And over it all came another sound, the pounding of hooves, rising fast. Apache riders, led by their chief, thundered toward town. Word had reached them. The storm was coming. In that heartbeat, the man knew his path had changed forever. No longer a nameless drifter, he had become an enemy to the town, a traitor to its law, and a figure standing in the fire between two peoples. The price of his choice, he knew, would be blood. But when he looked back, the girl's eyes met his. They shook with fear, yet burned with that same fire. In that moment, every shred of doubt inside him turned to ash. He had chosen. And he would see it through to the end. The thunder of hooves rolled in from the distance, merging with the panicked cries of the Kenwood square. Dust rose like a storm, veiling the sun in a choking haze. The crowd, moments ago eager to see a hanging, broke apart in terror. Men shoved each other down alleyways, women screamed as they dragged their children away, and bodies fell hard in the scramble. On the scaffold, the cowboy drew ragged breaths, smoke curling from the barrel of his Colt. His heart pounded like a war drum, yet his eyes were cold and sharp. Beside him, the Apache girl still trembled, wrists raw and bleeding, her face pale, but her eyes alight like sacred fire. She looked at him, astonishment, gratitude, and fear flashing all at once. "Run!" he barked, voice hoarse from smoke and adrenaline. But she hadn't taken 2 steps before gunfire cracked from the guards. Bullets splintered the timber, one fragment grazing his cheek like a hot brand. He spun, dragging her behind him, and fired back. 2 soldiers fell, their cries drowned in the chaos. The old judge shrieked from below, his voice shrill with both rage and terror. "Kill him! Kill them both, the drifter and the savage girl!" Kenwood's soldiers surged forward, rifles raised, eyes wild. But the thunder of hooves crashed into the square, and the tide turned. The Apache chief rode at the head of his warriors, his face streaked with red and black, his braids flying, his weapons gleaming in the sunday. Their war cries split the air like lightning, rattling the wooden shutters of every house along the square. The execution had become a battlefield. Bullets and arrows cut the air, smoke mingling with dust into a blinding fog. Screams and gunshots clashed with the screams of terrified horses. Kenwood citizens stampeded, trampling one another, children wailing, shopkeepers bolting their doors, while fire licked higher in the distance. Blood soaked the sand until the ground itself seemed to bleed. The cowboy held tight to his revolver, each shot ringing like thunder. He fired with grim precision, each pull of the trigger a vow. Miss once, and they would both be dead. His hand trembled, but his aim held steady. The Apache girl no longer cowered. Though her hands were slick with blood, she snatched a fallen knife, her eyes gleaming with steel. She stood at his side, ready to meet death as fiercely as he did. "You're insane," she whispered, voice quivering yet fierce. "You'll die for me." "Maybe," he answered, eyes never leaving the enemy. "But it's the path I chose." A soldier charged the scaffold, bayonet lowered. The girl hurled the knife, and the blade buried itself deep in his throat. He toppled, choking, blood spraying across the boards, eyes wide with disbelief. The drumbeat of the execution still pounded in the cowboy's ears, a ghostly rhythm that now seemed to drive the battle itself. No longer a summons for her death, it had become the march of blood and bullets. Through the haze, he caught sight of the Apache chief, old yet blazing with strength. With a single swing of his axe, the chief cut a soldier cleanly down. His roar shook the square, sending tremors through Kenwood's defenders. Still, they pressed forward, wolves cornered but not yet broken. The cowboy seized the girl, pulling her from the scaffold. They tumbled hard into the sand, rolling just as bullets shredded the planks where they had stood. He rose, firing back, dragging her toward an alley. But the way was blocked. Rifles bristled at one end, blades and Apache spears glinted at the other. The square was a cauldron of fire. Men fell over one another, blood pooling in the dirt. Flames leapt from a store, struck by stray gunfire, firelight dancing across twisted faces of rage and terror. The cowboy gasped for breath, sweat streaking with dust across his weathered face. His hands bled from splinters and cuts, yet his grip on the Colt was iron. The Apache girl stood beside him, eyes blazing like the dawn. In the chaos, their gazes locked. No words passed, none needed. They both knew there was no retreat. They would fight until the last bullet, until the last breath. Gunfire roared. Hooves thundered. Screams split the air. Kenwood was no longer a town. It was a battlefield, where law lay shattered, and where love and blood burned together in a fire no storm could quench. Gunsmoke still coiled thick over Kenwood Square. The stench of blood clung to the air, mingling with the burning oil of shops set ablaze. The thunder of Apache hooves shook the earth, clashing with the crack of rifles and the cries of the wounded. The little frontier town had fallen into a nightmare no one could have imagined. The cowboy clutched his Colt, sweat and blood running together down his weathered face. Every bullet he fired was a vow, a silent promise that he would not let the Apache girl fall while he still breathed. But his cylinder was nearly empty, and the hammering of his heart told him the end was closing in. The girl stood beside him, eyes blazing in the haze. Her wrists bled where the ropes had bitten, but she held a dagger with the steadiness of a warrior. No longer the helpless prisoner on the gallows, she had become his companion in defiance, ready to die as he was. "You can still walk away," she cried, voice cutting through the chaos. "Don't die for me." He glanced at her, eyes dry but steady with fire. "I've chosen. If I abandon you, I'll die anyway, just quieter." A roar shook the square. Kenwood's soldiers formed a line, rifles leveled, bayonets gleaming. Across from them, Apache riders thundered forward, lances and axes high. In that instant, Kenwood split in two, cold law on one side, burning fury on the other. And caught between was the cowboy and the girl, two sparks in the storm. He drew a long breath, the revolver heavy in his hand. The metallic click told him only a few rounds remained. Sweat trickled into the cut on his cheek, stinging as it mixed with blood. He knew the price of his choice. Death waited only a few steps away. The first volley rang out. A bullet ripped into his shoulder, hot fire searing through flesh. He staggered, teeth clenched, but the light in his eyes did not dim. The girl cried out, catching him as he nearly fell. "You can't die here," she screamed. He gritted his teeth, raised the Colt again, and sent another soldier crashing down. His breath came ragged, every heartbeat ready to tear him apart. Yet in his gaze the fire burned, unbroken. Memories surged. Years of wandering, nights wasted in whiskey haze, endless roads without meaning. He had been nothing but a drifter, rootless, living only by the gun. But now, amidst the storm of blood and fire, he had found his reason. This Apache girl, this forbidden love, he would pay for with his life. The pounding of hooves split the square. The Apache chief appeared, axe gleaming, his cry splitting the air as he felled a soldier in one brutal swing. His old eyes blazed as they found the cowboy, who stood with the girl clutched to him. In that look, something shifted. Not hatred, not suspicion, but recognition. This man had chosen his side. Kenwood's troops would not yield. A whistle shrieked, and fresh soldiers stormed the square. Rifles raised, gunfire flashed, blades clashed. Men screamed as sand turned red beneath their boots. The cowboy felt another shot tear into his ribs. Blood spread across his coat, soaking leather until it clung heavy. He swayed, nearly falling, yet he still raised his Colt, its bark hoarse in the chaos. The girl pulled him into the shadow of a cracked wall, shielding him as best she could. "Stop! Let me protect you," she begged, her voice breaking. He shook his head, lips curling in a faint smile smeared with blood. "No, you're the reason I'm still standing. Before them, the soldiers tightened the circle, rifles black and ready. Hatred burned in their eyes. Somewhere, the drumbeat of execution sounded again, mocking, inevitable. He felt it, death drawing near, one heartbeat at a time. But fear did not hold him now. Instead, a strange calm settled. Love would not save him, but it had given him reason to choose, to fight, to stand tall, even before the grave. He turned, pulling the girl into his arms, whispering into her ear, "If I die today, I do not regret it. This is the price I accept." The square roared. Flames licked the sky red. Where once an Apache girl was meant to hang, now stood a battlefield marked by his choice law, shattered by love, order drowned in fire and blood. And as the soldiers raised their rifles, fingers tightening on the triggers, the cowboy straightened one last time. His eyes shone, fierce to the final breath. He gripped his Colt, ready to meet fate head-on. Above, a raven croaked hoarsely, a black omen circling the smoke. Below, his heart pounded in time with the drum of death. The battle was not yet done, but he knew love had demanded its price, and he had paid it in full. Smoke and fire still veiled the Kenwood square, though the gunfire had slowed. Survivors, soldiers, and Apache alike stood panting, eyes wild like beasts after the hunt. Bodies lay scattered among shattered timbers, blood soaking into sand until the ground itself seemed to steam. Kenwood was no longer a town. It had become a graveyard, still hot with breath. The cowboy knelt, his bloodied hand pressed against his chest to stem the flow. Wounds in his shoulder and ribs bled freely. Every breath, another blade cutting deeper. Yet he forced himself upright, refusing to fall. Beside him, the Apache girl pressed close, eyes brimming with tears, but still burning. Her trembling hands pressed rags to his wounds, as though her will alone could keep him alive. "Don't speak," she whispered, voice breaking. "You will live. You must." A faint smile tugged at his bloodied lips. "I never truly lived, until I met you." Silence stretched, broken only by the groans of the dying. Her tears fell, mixing with the blood soaking his worn leather coat. Hooves thundered nearer, Apache reinforcements arriving, but it also meant Kenwood's soldiers were regrouping. Death still lingered, waiting for its cue. Through the haze, the old judge clung to a crumbled wall, his face pale as ash, yet his eyes still hard with spite. His voice rasped across the square. "Seize them! The traitor must not leave alive." The call stirred the wounded soldiers. Bloodied and swaying, they raised their rifles, hatred burning in their eyes. But as they sighted down their barrels, they faltered at the sight. The cowboy, broken but unbowed, shielding the Apache girl with his body, revolver lifted in defiance. For a heartbeat, the square froze. Only the croak of ravens circling above broke the silence, a grim toll for fate itself. The cowboy sucked in a ragged breath, lifting the heavy Colt, voice grinding but sharp as steel. "Any man who touches her walks over my corpse first." No one moved. Eyes darted, torn between advancing to die or retreating to live. The Apache chief rode into the square, axe raised high, his warriors roaring behind him. Kenwood's defenders wavered. The girl gripped his hand, tears streaking her cheeks. "You've given everything for me. But what of me? I cannot let you die alone." He turned to her, eyes soft despite the fire in them. "You will not die. You must live to carry this flame further than I can." Her sobs broke free, but in her tears shone a vow. The battle still raged, in fits and bursts. Gunfire cracked, horses screamed. And then, from behind, a stray bullet slammed into the cowboy's back. His body jolted, then toppled forward. "No!" the girl cried, catching him as he fell. Blood poured across her arms, soaking her in red. He forced his eyes open, breath rattling. A faint smile lingered. "Don't fear. That drumbeat, it isn't for you. It's for me." His eyes closed, but his hand still clenched the Colt, as though his spirit kept fighting even as his body failed. The execution drumbeat of that morning echoed in every mind. No longer meant for the Apache girl, it now tolled as an eternal dirge for the cowboy who had defied town, law, and fate itself. The girl held him, her cry piercing the smoke, blazing like fire against the night. Her grief rose with the shouts of the Apache warriors until the heavens themselves seemed to shudder. The old judge staggered back, then fled. Kenwood's soldiers broke and scattered, leaving the square behind. Only blood, smoke, and the memory of a name remained. The gallows still stood, rope severed, swaying in the wind, creaking like a cruel laugh. It became a monument to a truth. Laws may bind men, but love could defy even death. And from that day on, whenever the wind howled across Kenwood Square, townsfolk swore they could still hear the echoes of the gallows, the ghostly drum, the pounding of a fearless heart, and the last gunshot of a cowboy who chose love over a coward's life.